Hello, folks. This is your host, Tammy Tuckey, and you are now listening to the Tiara Talk Show. We bring you rare interviews with the makers of Disney magic. Whether they be singers, actors, Imagineers, animators, they have all made their mark on the Disney name. Be sure to check out the show notes, other episodes, contests, our social media pages from Facebook to Twitter, and more on our official website at www.thetiaratalkshow.com. Are you looking to plan and book an upcoming Disney vacation? Contact the Tiara Talk Show's official travel agent, James from Destinations in Florida, by visiting destinationsinflorida.com/Tiara for a free quote. The link is also included in the show notes on our website. All guest opinions are theirs and theirs alone and do not represent the opinions of the Tiara Talk Show or de host. The Tiara Talk Show is not associated with the Disney Company. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. And from all of us here at the Tiara Talk Show, have a hoop-de-doo day. I'm excited to welcome this week's Tiara Talk Show guest, former Disney animator Glen Keane, to the show. Welcome, Glen.
Hello, Tammy. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the Tiara Talk Show.
And so as we're recording this interview, the announcement of the Academy Awards nominations has not happened yet, but it's coming up later this week. And your animated film, The Duet, was on the top 10 animated films list that went onto the main voting process. This is big. This is huge. And I'm really excited because this animated short that you made is just spectacular. It's fantastic. So would you mind giving like a little synopsis and talk about how you kind of got to the point of making this animated short?
Well, yeah, thank you for asking about it. It's the first thing that happened for me after I left Disney. I was there for 38 years and felt that there was something new waiting, but I didn't know what it was, and it turned out to be a Duet. I went up to Google and they showed me this virtual world device where you can look in. It was a Android phone. But more than a phone, as you looked in the screen, it really became a window into a virtual world where you could follow animation and you had the camera in your hand. And they said, so what would you do with this? And I said, well, what do you want? Regina Dugan, who was the head of this group at Google, a group called ATAP, she said, we just want you to make something beautiful and emotional. Whoa, okay, I'd love to hear that. But what's the catch? I mean, what are you selling? She said, well, we're not selling anything. We just want you to push yourself creatively, and that's going to push us technologically. And so that's what I did. I took the challenge and started to develop an idea that seemed immediately to just be forming. I asked Jenny Rim, my producer, and my son Max, who became our production designer, to work with me on it. And it's basically the story of two people who are destined to be together, a boy and a girl, and you follow their lives from the time they are just cells to where they are born, and you watch these two little babies grow up, and one baby crawls to the screen left, the other baby crawls screen right, and as they crawl, you watch them start to grow. The little girl wants to be a ballerina, and the little boy wants adventure. And every time the boy and the girl cross, you have a choice. You can follow one or the other. And it finally ends up in the end where they both find their own course in life, and in doing that, find one another. And it's a wonderful little 3.5-minute love story. I think of it more as a visual poem than a traditionally storyboarded linear story. I mean, this is more because there's these two characters that follow their own life course. It's kind of like we think of it as a double helix, this two spiral staircases that intertwine these two characters, and you as the person that controls the camera can jump back and forth between those two spiral staircases. You'll have to see how it works, Tammy. It's coming out. It's been out now on a Moto X Android, and soon it'll come out on all Androids, and eventually, hopefully, into iPhones as well.
that's just an amazing process that Google really wants to kind of push and push farther into animation, see what they can do. And there's been so many new developments over the years with animation, and you went from drawing Tarzan to drawing Rapunzel, and Rapunzel's completely CGI, but of course animation is still playing a part into this. And again, you said you worked for the Disney company for 38 years. You worked alongside Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, who were a part of the original Nine Old Men. Do you take some of their advice into these projects?
They are so much a part of me. I could never forget them. I could never, and would never want to, forget the important truths that they were trying to communicate to me. I was 20 years old when I started working with them, and their goal was to pass on the baton, to pass on something that they had really invented. And Ollie Johnston, I remember, would tell me give me these little pearls of wisdom, and he'd say, "No, Glenn, I'm going to tell you something, and you're not quite ready to learn it yet, but I'm going to tell you anyway, and someday you'll understand." I said, "Yeah, well, what is it?" And then he'd say something like, "Don't animate what the character is doing. Animate what the character is thinking." And I thought, wow, yeah, and I'd write it down, and I'd pin that up on my desk, and I'd look at it and go, what the heck does that mean? I just didn't understand it. But I know that, like, when I was finally doing Tangled, and I would draw over top of the animators' scenes, in dailies, all the animators would sit in a room, and I had a Cintiq where I could draw over top of their animation, their CG animation, and these words would come back. And I remember specifically at that point, Ollie's comment, and I said, Ollie Johnston told me this, don't animate what the character is doing, animate what the character is thinking. And this is what he meant. And I drew over top it and showed why Rapunzel would act differently if you animated what she was thinking. And there was so many, these wonderful moments kept bubbling up through that whole experience of animating or supervising on Tangled. It was really about passing on this baton that they gave to me.
You worked on another character of John Silver in Treasure Planet. So with John Silver, he actually has one of those CGI legs and arms as well. So did that actually help with the animating that in 2002, along with working with Rapunzel?
I've had a love affair with CG ever since, like, John Lasseter and I started the very first little animation test with CG in '82, and it was to this little Murray Sendak book, Where the Wild Things Are, and we had done a little 90 seconds of animation, and John went on to do nothing but CG, and I stayed with hand-drawn. But anytime I found that the computer crosses my path, it challenges me to be a better artist. I've always seen myself as an artist first, an animator second, and in Tarzan, like the Tarzan surfing down the tree branches using deep canvas, really allowed me to think more dimensionally. CG and hand-drawn really came together in the same character with Silver, where literally his arm is CG and his leg is CG and part of his head is, and working really closely with Eric Daniels in creating that synthesis of this character. I found that CG and hand-drawn were becoming closer and closer on Rapunzel. At one point, I was planning on Rapunzel being a film that was going to be done in hand-drawn, and Michael Eisner looked at all the drawings I had done. This is when Michael was still head of the studio at Disney, and he said, well, yes, we need to do this movie Rapunzel. I said, great. He said, but there's one thing, Glenn, I want you to do it in CG. And I said, well, Michael, do you like all the drawings that I've done there? And he said, yeah, I love them. I said, well, you can't do that in CG. And he said, well, Glenn, I mean, there must be some way you can take what you love in hand-drawn and bring it into CG. And I thought it was such a naive but pure and innocent statement, and I could not say no to it. It's like, yeah, there's got to be a way you can take those same drawing principles. And so that's what I started to bring into Tangled, into Rapunzel, and found that drawing is really the basis of design, and it translates into CG. And finally with Duet, it was really a wonderful way of celebrating line and drawing, and yet in the most cutting edge technology so far in this interactive world of animation that we did through Google.
With Duet, I would love to see, are you even planning on making your own full-length animated film?
That's possible. I mean, there's a lot of open doors that we haven't gone through yet. And yes, I have been developing a long-form story that would be absolutely wonderful to do with just the right partners who I'm looking for right now. My dad is a cartoonist. I grew up in a home where he created the family circus. He was constantly telling jokes. He was an entertainer. I grew up with my brothers. We were always telling stories, doing puppet shows. I was writing stories and books. And I mean, since I've been a kid, I knew that I was going to be telling stories in some way or another. And now that I'm just a really older kid, I'm still doing that. The key that I kept hearing from the 9 Old Men was the key to Disney animation is sincerity. And I didn't know what that meant. I mean, I sincerely wanted to be a better animator, like when I'm 20 years old, but I mean, what does that mean? I would press harder on my pencil and the point would break, and it wasn't about trying harder. It was, ultimately I learned, it was believing the characters are real, believing in the characters. I mean, as a kid, I'm sure, Tammy, you must have been like me, and you would play make-believe.
As Ariel.
Yeah.
Many times.
Suddenly, I remember after when Little Mermaid came out, I had a swimming teacher come up to me, and she knew that I had animated Ariel, and she said, "I am so mad at you, Mr. Keane." I said, "Well, why?" See, because now all the little girls in my swim class no longer use their arms. They put them down by their side and they just kick their feet like they're fins together.
Now I have 3 Disney questions I always ask my guests. They're called the Fab Three. So we'll start with the Donald one. So as a child, what Disney film would you always like to watch over and over again?
I remember the one that I remember most was 101 Dalmatians. It was on my birthday. And we all went to a movie theater. I mean, not a movie theater. We went to the drive-in theater. And there was 7 in our family. We're all in a station wagon. And this is like the ultimate test for any film. If it can capture you, even though you're sitting in a station wagon stuffed with your brothers and sisters and popcorn spilling everywhere and the windows fogging up and you're hearing the sound through a lousy, crummy metal speaker hanging on your window, that's a great film. And I never will forget the feeling I had about Cruella de Vil and how frightening and how she was more real than real. And it was, I was just so captivated by how she moved and the weight of her coat as she threw it around. And I mean, it was magical. It was the most mesmerizing thing in the world. And later on, to be able to meet Mark Davis and to actually be taught by him, I truly was in awe of that man's ability.
And our goofy question, what Disney character do you think would be your best friend if you met them in person? Now, since you're an animator, can you choose one that you've actually animated and then one that you have not animated?
Well, I think I would choose Tarzan as my best friend. I mean, I felt like I knew him so well. There's always a point where the characters become so real. I remember leaving the studio. I was working in Paris where we were animating Tarzan, and at the beginning you're trying to understand who he is and how he moves, and different animators are coming up with poses, and I would say, no, Tarzan wouldn't do that. He would do this. And one evening as I went out there to hop on my bike to ride back to our apartment, just leaving work, I realized I wasn't alone, that next to me was Tarzan. And I felt like I could put my arm around him. And I knew exactly how he would move. And there was like a little jump of about a 3-foot high wall that I had to hop off of to get down to where my bike was. And before I jumped, I just pictured Tarzan exactly how he would hop and jump. And I knew him. I just knew him so well. I felt like he was me. I was him. He would be my best friend. And I guess, see, you have a question? What was, non-Disney character? I would have to say Peter Pan. I really I've always dreamed of flying. I just want to fly with that guy. Yeah, that would be a dream to me. Come on, everybody, here we go.
And our Mickey question, if I asked you to name any song, any Disney song at this very moment, what immediately comes to mind?
Part of Your World. I mean, Ariel singing Part of Your World has been in my DNA. I was supposed to do Ursula, and then, because I'd been doing big villain characters before that, and then I heard Jodie Benson sing Part of Your World and was watching Howard Ashman coaching her and turning off the lights in the recording studio and whispering to her and telling her, you're in this grotto alone, and this is like your bedroom, and this is where all of your dreams are. And as he just kind of cast this spell on Jodie as she sang that song, and I just believed that character and believed that she really could. I guess it's the believing the impossible is impossible. The impossible is possible. That's what I related to. I wanted to animate that desire that the impossible could become real for her. And so when I think of that song, it's very much me. I think I'm an idealist. The glass is always half full to me. I relate to Ariel.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Glenn. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Tammy.
To guide these lives we see.